Hello. So, on my last real video, um, I had a comment from Yunmai. It said, how often do you go through these NI moments every day? I know it might be very difficult to estimate because you might forget about it. Um, so, introverted intuition specifically, I mean, I I use it all the time. Um, but the epiphanies, like the NI moment I think you're referring to, is one where I see some symbols and they kind of click like all at the same time. It's kind of like an epiphany. Um, I don't get them very often. I've been wanting to pay attention and collect a ton of examples, but whenever I do come up with one, I end up um, it ends up that the content of the realization is a lot more interesting to me than the symbol itself, and I end up forgetting about um, writing it down or saving it for a specific presentation about introverted intuition. So, um, but yeah, when I'm having a conversation with someone about politics or economics, um, I every once in a while I'll have some really complicated things that are in my head at the same time. Several different concepts, because these NI symbols, they're like condensed versions of entire concepts, and they're really efficient, but they're extremely difficult to decompress and explain in a way that fits like a normal human conversation. So um, I have to figure out how to keep all of them in my head while I'm kind of taking apart one of them and explaining it. So that's one example where the introverted intuition is like really like vivid and um, and really important. But usually it's just the way it happens is just the way I think most people are somewhat familiar with it. Um, like when I think of a truck, for example, I like it's in my head. Like I picture it, or when I think of um, any object, I'll have some rough representation in my head. And and then when it's more complicated, like if I were to think of the second law of thermodynamics, I mean, I think of I think of sunlight coming in because this is the context where I talk about it the most. And I think of like an imaginary border, um, and I think of like things happening on the inside where entropy is increasing or maybe decreasing if that sunlight is entering the system. So that represents a system that is not isolated if it's coming in, and entropy can increase or decrease in that system. Um, and and I also see something being reflected out too. Not sure what significance that has, but um, it's almost like I see multiple things at the same time overlaid on top of each other too. Because I see kind of like a jungle. I also see like a lake. I see like an environment where an organism might evolve. Because that's one of the examples. That's like the main context where I've been thinking about the second law of thermodynamics recently. Evolution does not break that law because it's not an isolated system. Anyway, so um, it's just the way my brain works. The more complicated it is, the more abstract it is, the weirder it is to describe to people. But um, it does affect me in conversation. And um, one example is when I was interviewing for a job with the CEO of the company. Um, he asked me some introspective question, and so I kind of was like, thinking about it. And then he's like a perfect CEO type of personality. Such a sharp guy, and it's so funny to see his reaction. He's like looking at me like, and then I'm like looking out the window, and he went like this. Um, it was pretty hilarious. Same thing happened on a date. She asked me if I plan on living in Utah my whole life, and in my head, I was like zooming out. I had a view of a map of the places that I had lived in, and anyway. It was like a very involved image, um, and I was like looking to the side, and she like did that same thing. She's like, so, I guess it must not be common for people to stare into the distance when they're thinking about something. I It doesn't feel weird when I do it, but everyone else apparently thinks it's weird. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, these introverted intuition experiences, but um, I'm I would love to come up with some compilation of, or some collection of examples of what introverted intuition does for abstract concepts, where it takes something like physical and concrete and uses that as a representation of the abstract thing. That would be awesome. Hopefully I can create something like that. But like I said, the more interesting it is, the more distracting the actual content is. And in most likely what'll happen is I'll be mentioning it when it comes up every once in a while, but then you'll get glimpses of what it is as it comes up. I may not end up creating a very solid presentation of these symbols and examples of them. I would love to, but who knows. So yeah, but definitely as I present things, I'll try to point out what the symbol appeared in my mind, and most likely if I do have something visual in my video, it will be something that my brain gave me. So yeah, let me know if you have any other questions about that. Thanks.